Imagine someone roasts you so hard you get sent to another world. Our boy Misumi is an ordinary loser. Suddenly he gets teleported to a mistress who roasts him so hard he gets sent to Brazil. Now hold up, I just realized that 98% of you aren't subscribed yet. Wanna see a trick? Look at my profile picture. Please subscribe. If you see the button glow up, please hit it with the bell icon and the like as it helps me a lot. Thank you. Misumi woke up early as usual that day, ate breakfast, practiced archery, and everything was fine. But something strange happened when Misumi suddenly found himself in front of a master who appeared before him in a majestic halo of light. The master told him that he would be transported to a new world called Isekai. Misumi was amazed, and the master was even more amazed, thinking that Misumi already knew about it. We later learned that this master is Tsukuyomi, the ruler of the night world. Tsukuyomi tells Misumi that he has come to Japan specifically to give him immense power to help him fit into his new world. Misumi was amazed by all this, especially when he remembered that Tsukuyomi was one of the most powerful masters. Tsukuyomi granted the power to Misumi, who was transported to the new world as soon as it happened. But once he moved to Isekai, he found himself unwelcome there by the mistress, who mocked him and told him to stay away from the inhabitants of her world. Tsukuyomi was forced to reappear and sacrifice a large portion of his spiritual energy and give it to Misumi so that he could become superhuman and qualify for life in his new world. Tsukuyomi disappeared and Misumi began his journey, but he soon grew tired, especially after going 3 days without food or drink. Boredom began to creep in as well, as he didn't see any living creatures and could only hear footsteps and the sound of the wind. On the evening of his third day, he heard a girl's cry for help, so he quickly approached the source of the sound to get a closer look. And there he saw what surprised him, where he saw a huge ferocious dog with 2 heads, and the strange thing is that the dog was talking and asked Misumi in a frightening voice for his name. Misumi replied with his new name, Isekai Makoto. Soon the dog began to attack Misumi, and a fierce battle ensued, but Misumi was able to use his super strength and kill the dog. But what made him most surprised was that when he approached the girl, it was not a girl, but a pig dressed in human clothes and talking like a human. The pig thanked him for his bravery, and when Misumi asked her who she was, she told him that her name was Emma and that she used to be human. But she had to change into this form in order to offer herself as a sacrifice because her village was no longer producing crops and had suffered a drought in recent years. Misumi then asked her where the nearest village was, and she told him that it was far away and he would have to continue on. Although Misumi was very tired, he had to keep going no matter what, and so he did, resenting the master who had given him such a bad reception in Isekai and sent him to the farthest reaches of the land. Finally, after an arduous journey with Emma, Misumi reached a village where he found food and sat down to eat greedily. Misumi noticed that Emma was able to pull dishes onto the table by airplane and asked her how she did it. Emma told him that it was because of the magic spells that everyone in their village had mastered. Misumi asked her to teach him, and Emma started to do so, and we noticed that Misumi's level was way behind hers. Misumi thanked her for the hospitality and went to bed thinking about everything that had happened. In the morning, Emma found out that Misumi had left and was very sad. She found a letter from him in which he wrote that he had taken the paper with the spells and would learn everything. He promised to return as soon as he reached a high magical level in order to help them regain the ability to farm. Misumi began to use the spells to defeat the Shin Dragon, which Misumi learned from Emma was responsible for the fog and drought that destroyed agriculture. But one day he misused one of the spells, summoning the Shin Dragon. Misumi tried to use the super strength that Tsukuyomi had given him, but the dragon was much stronger, and Misumi decided to surround himself with an aura of power that would protect him from the dragon's attack. But soon after the dragon realized that Misumi came from the human world, he suggested that they work together, especially after the dragon was able to access Misumi's memory and see what was in it. Shin Dragon and Misumi eventually came to an agreement in which the dragon would help Misumi, much to Misumi's delight. We saw Shin Dragon getting Misumi a portion of his powers so that they could work together. We learned that the Shin Dragon, after completing her agreement with Misumi, is no longer in her dragon form but has transformed into one of Misumi's colleagues within the guild. That's why we saw Misumi talking to her about the terms of the agreement and they discussed it together. Afterward, Shin decided to take Misumi on a tour to show him how she created the fog that caused drought and poor harvests in Emma's village. Misumi was amazed at the strange world, and even more so when he saw some of the fruits he was used to in his human world. Misumi was amazed at the enormity of the place, so he used one of his powers to measure the dimensions of the place and realized that the place stretched for vast distances. After some time, Misumi decided to return with the Shin Dragon to Emma's village. In the village, we saw Emma, who was very frightened when she saw Shin and kept asking Misumi why he was taking her to their village. But Misumi reassured her and told her that he had made an agreement with Shin that their differences would be resolved. And indeed, after a short time, all was well. The village chief was pleased with this reconciliation through Misumi, and so was Emma, who kept thanking Misumi for saving her and her village after this reconciliation with Shin. But what Misumi didn't know was that the contract he made with Shin required the people of Emma's village to relocate to another place under Shin's control. This worried Misumi, especially when Shin told him that the new place where the villagers would live was located in a desolate area high above the ground. But Shin reassured him and the villagers that there would be no more disagreements and that everything would be fine. Misumi was then surprised by a miniature version of Shin. He was horrified and kept asking Shin about the creature, at which point Shin laughed and told him that she could clone herself. Misumi asks her about the rest of her superpowers, but she tells him that she'll let him know in time. The residents of Emma Village moved to the Orc Highlands, which became their new home, and all was well. On the Orc Highlands, Misumi noticed that his superpowers were increasing, which led him to realize that the main reason for this was that he was close to Shin's sphere of influence. He found himself able to control many things better and more accurately than before. His only weakness was when Shin was able to access his memory, and he had to agree to her every request. Misumi noticed that Shin was recording all the memories she had access to in his mind. He realized this when he saw many of his memories in front of him and asked her to never let his memories out in public again. Misumi decided to create a secluded area relatively far from where the people of Emma Village lived, and there he was surprised by a tree that was very large, but he was able to cut it down with his magic sword. Although the sword was small, its power was enormous and it cut down the tree in record time. But Misumi realized that he had injured himself. Misumi tried to try the healing spells on himself, but all his attempts failed, so he began to try other spells. The sound of Shin's arrival interrupted his train of thought as she came carrying the body of a badly injured old man. Misumi marveled at the scene and asked Shin about it. Shin told him that a creature had attacked her territory. The creature's remnants, which consisted of sharp objects, showed the creature's ferocity. Shin told Misumi that his human blood could bring the alien to their location, much to Shin's dismay. The alien soon appeared and began a vicious attack on Misumi and Shin. Misumi tried to be calm and began to use his magic spell, focusing on using the fire spell to maximize the amount of damage he could inflict on the creature. Shin was amazed at what was happening and kept encouraging Misumi to attack. Strangely enough, even though Misumi used his best spells, the creature was able to absorb the spell. What's more, it used the infected area to create antibodies to Misumi's spells. We can say that the power of this creature is its ability to withstand successive blows, to deal with them, and to use them to heal itself. The injured old man started talking, and Shin asked him who he was, and he told her that he was the leader of the dwarves. At the time, Misumi was trying to learn more about the attack techniques of the creature, which turned out to be a giant spider. However, the spider soon launched an even more powerful attack, and the spider managed to seriously injure Misumi, but Misumi was able to endure the pain. Misumi then decided to summon as much power as he could, shaped it into an ice spell, and fired it violently at the spider and got rid of it. However, due to the effort, Misumi lost consciousness as soon as the battle was over. After some time, the spider woke up and started talking to Shin, who told her that she is currently in her human form, but was once a dragon. The spider was amazed and decided to make a pact with Misumi and Shin. After the deal was finalized, Misumi gained a new superpower and the spider turned into a beautiful girl. Misumi regained consciousness and was surprised to find the spider in her human form, offering him her services. After Misumi fulfills his agreement with the spider, he is amazed at the many transformations taking place in Isekai. First, he gained the Shin dragon, and now he's gained a very powerful and beautiful spider, so he was eager to see what's next. Then we saw this old dwarf, whose name we learned was Perrin, talking to Misumi and thanking him for stopping the spider and winning her over to his side, especially since Misumi was able to save the dwarf's entire village. The old man then asked Misumi to allow him and his people to move to the same village as Misumi. When Misumi hesitated to answer him, Shin spoke to the old dwarf and told him that they agreed on condition that the dwarves pay all the taxes and share the life of the land with them. The old man told them that he agreed and asked them to return for 2 days to his village to convince the people and then take them to live with Misumi and his companions. Misumi noticed that the Shin dragon and the spider starting to get jealous of each other. He also noticed that each of them was wooing him with their actions and trying to look better than their counterparts. But the jealousy came to a head when Shin dragon asked Misumi to give her a new name. Misumi started thinking and came up with the name Tomo and gave it to Shin, who was overjoyed. The spider became jealous and also asked Misumi to give her a name, so Misumi kept thinking until he named her Miyu, and she was very happy. The old dwarf managed to convince the people of his village and brought them all to talk to Misumi. Then we saw Tomo and Miyu introduce Misumi to the people of the dwarf village and tell everyone that Misumi is the master of this village and give him the title of Little Master. The village elder named Eldo, who was very old, came forward and was surprised when he realized that Misumi, despite his young age, was the leader of the village, but he treated him with respect. Misumi was very surprised to see many different kinds of monsters that he didn't know before. When he asked them about their types, each leader of a particular class introduced his class to Misumi, and they all told him that they were at his disposal and that they would partner with him in defending the village against any enemy. After Misumi finished his conversation with the new citizens, he left the place to think about everything that had happened, but he was surprised by a group of humans with darts and arrows. He found that they were ready to fight, and indeed, as soon as they spotted Misumi Misumi nearby, they started shooting arrows at him. Misumi narrowly escaped, but he was very unhappy, so he asked the dwarves why the humans were chasing him. They told him that the humans had heard him speak an eloquent language, which meant to them that Misumi was a demon and a great danger to them. Misumi knew the only solution was to learn the vernacular, and at first he thought it would be easy. But when he dug deeper, he found that learning slang was much more difficult than learning classical language. But he was determined to learn it because it was necessary so that he could live peacefully in his new world. After the first week, Misumi didn't feel any better. He found it very difficult, but he continued to try. However, it wasn't until after the first month that we can say that there was any noticeable improvement. Misumi was finally able to speak for a few minutes, using the vernacular correctly, which made him very happy. Satisfied with his vernacular, Misumi decided to visit the human village so that he could go to the Zetsuya Adventurers Guild. Misumi, Miyu, and Tomo set out for the village, and after arriving at the village gates, they all managed to get through by speaking slang to the guard. After a successful attempt, Misumi was assured that he was good enough to deal with everyone. Misumi was impersonating the son of a wealthy merchant, but he, Tomo, and Miyu wanted to join the Adventurers Guild, so they had to pass the exams. At first, the guild official gave them some easy tests, but she was surprised when they passed them with ease, and even more surprised when she found that their level was almost higher than the Adventurers Guild's best students. The Adventurers Guild official then learned that Misumi also possessed a license from the Merchants Guild, which qualified him for a rapid rise in level. After this happened, we found the old adventurers of the guild furious with these guests who had suddenly come to them and managed to occupy the top ranks of the guild. The three of them were issued admission cards, and Misumi found out the salary he would receive, and although the salary was satisfactory, Misumi was angry at the high cost of lodging, food, and drink within the guild. Misumi, Tomo, and Miyu went to their room and thought things were going well, but they were unaware of the danger they were in. Misumi felt a voice following him, and when he stopped walking, it was a young girl. Miyu intervened firmly, yelling at the girl and asking her what she wanted, but the girl became frightened and ran to Misumi crying. Misumi calmed the girl down and told Miyu to leave the girl alone, and they had no choice but to take the girl back to the house where they were staying. Although it seemed normal, we noticed that someone was listening to the whole situation as if it was an act of commission and not an accident, as Misumi thought. Misumi, Miyu, and the little girl went back to the house where the girl began to tell her story. The girl, named Rinan, said she and her sister used to live in a house they rented, but after a while, they were kicked out. The problem is that Rinan can't find her sister, who disappeared about a month ago. While Rinan was telling her story, Misumi heard a noise outside. When he came out of the house, he found Tomo engaged with some people who were tracking Rinan, and Misumi noticed that Tomo easily dispatched them. Misumi has been pondering the mystery of the girl who can't find her sister for a long time, racking his brain for possibilities. Rinan gave Misumi a picture that almost matched her sister's appearance. Misumi thanked her and promised to do his best to solve the mystery. He then told her the location of the room she would be sleeping in, causing Tomo and Miyu to be very jealous as usual. Misumi felt that he was beginning to be attracted to Tomo and Miyu, but he tried not to think about it. Instead, he wanted to strive for advancement in the Adventurers Guild while trying to solve the mystery of Rinan and help her find her sister. The next day, we saw Misumi traveling through the village with Rinan by his side, and they talked about Rinan's past, who told Misumi that she used to belong to a family of powerful adventurers, but she and her sister had fallen so low that they couldn't make ends meet, and before her sister's disappearance, their financial situation was very difficult. At that time, Miyu and Tomo were alone in the house. They were surprised by the arrival of someone they didn't recognize from afar. However, when the person approached, Tomo and Miyu were surprised to find that it was Mills, who was the guild's most powerful adventurer of all time. Misumi's conversation with Rinan led him to the place where she had recently been working, and he offered to take her there to talk to the people in charge to see if they could help her find her sister. Misumi and Rinan arrived at the place and cast an invisibility spell on himself, and after Rinan went inside, Misumi was nowhere to be seen. The person in charge started talking to Rinan and asked her who she was living with. Rinan told him about Misumi and his friends. This person told her to steal all the gold coins belonging to Misumi and her friends. When Rinan was surprised, the man told her that this was necessary in order to pay off her sister's debts and eventually find her. Miyu and Tomo learned that although Nulls is the strongest adventurer in the village, he is the leader of the evil business in the village, and it is when Nulls offers to help him capture Misumi that they are most surprised. Miyu and Tomo were surprised and asked him why, at which point he told them that Misumi was one of the most dangerous monsters in their village. Miyu and Tomo naturally reject the offer and start attacking Mel's and his assistants. But Mel's magical power was so great that he was able to create a magical barrier in front of him, preventing Miyu and Tomo's blows from reaching him. Meanwhile, Rinan was very confused. She didn't want to steal Misumi because he was was the one who helped her in her crisis. However, she was torn about what to do because robbing Misumi was the only way she could find her sister. At this point, Misumi appeared to reassure Rinon that he was able to read her thoughts and reassured her that they would find her sister without having to steal anyone, and Rinon was very happy about that. We returned to Tomo and Miyu and saw them start a fierce battle against Melz and his associates. Melz was extremely careless in the battle because he was overconfident in his magical power and the strength of his men. However, Tomo and Miyu teach him and his men a harsh lesson in a short time, much to the surprise of Melz, who didn't think they were that strong. Even though they had won the battle, they were still jealous of each other, so they began to tell each other that they were the main reason for the victory. Then they began to show off their strength and tell each other that they had eliminated more men, which made the village loud and angry at their super strength. After the battle was over, Rinon was able to find her sister, and they were overjoyed. Her sister kept apologizing to her for getting her into so much trouble, and then Misumi picked them up and took them back home. Misumi then began to chastise Tomo and Miyu for overusing their superpowers. He takes some of Miyu's cobwebs, ties them up, and releases them outside. After the many battles that took place in the village, much of the village was destroyed, and Tomo began to seriously consider leaving the village, which was good news for Miyu, of course, who wanted this to happen because if Tomo left, she would be living alone with Misumi. Afterward, Rinon and Miyu had a conversation, and Rinon asked her if she was Misumi's girlfriend or not. Miyu felt very ashamed and told her that she was just a follower and not his girlfriend. Misumi then decided to move out of the village and took Rinon, her sister, and Miyu with him. On the way, a group of rare monsters in the form of red-colored birds appeared. As soon as Rinon saw them, she informed Misumi that they were a rare and dangerous species. Misumi asked Miyu to engage these monsters. Rinon warned her not to aim her blows at the eyes or wings, and Rinon's sister informed her that the main weakness of these monsters is their abdomen. But Misumi changed his mind at the last minute and decided to do the job, so he pulled out his bow and arrows and started aiming arrows at the monsters. We saw that they were so accurate that all the arrows hit and killed the monsters, and Misumi didn't miss a single arrow. Miyu, Rinon, and her sister were amazed at the accuracy of Misumi's aim and began to feed on parts of the killed insects, which was suitable food for them as they used to do before they transformed into their human form. They also paid attention to the sapphire eyes that the insects had, because those eyes added a lot of power to them. Misumi then decided to continue on to the town of Seiji, and after a long journey, they reached their destination. Misumi began to familiarize himself with the town and then headed to the Seiji Adventurers Guild. There, Misumi thought he would find that his Adventurers Guild ID card had been upgraded, but to his surprise, he was still at the same rank. But luck smiled on him when he learned that the biggest job in the guild at the time was from the Rembrandt Company, who wanted to obtain a large number of sapphire eyes, which he already had after his last battle against the bugs. Rina and her sister thanked Misumi profusely for what he had done for them and decided to separate from the group. But Misumi was determined to make the goodbye even better, so they all decided to go to a restaurant for a celebratory meal. In the evening, we saw them all enter a butcher shop. Misumi was soon attracted by the pleasant smell of the food and was overjoyed when he saw the meat, so he pounced on it and was very impressed by its wonderful taste. A number of members of different sects who lived in the same village joined Misumi, and everyone began to enjoy their meals and chat with each other. After a short time, one of the dwarves asked Misumi to challenge him to an arm wrestling match. Despite the strength of the dwarf's arms, Misumi managed to win without much effort. Misumi ordered more meat. The fun dinner party ended and everyone left. We saw Misumi talking to Miyu about everything that happened at the party, and then Misumi asked her to go home alone. When Miyu asked why, Misumi told her that he was going to go to his carriage to collect things before thieves attacked them like before. Miyu was very happy to finally be alone with Misumi without Tomo. Miyu returned home alone, and shortly after, Misumi returned as well. Miyu wanted to spend the night talking, but Misumi soon fell into a deep sleep, much to Miyu's annoyance. The next morning, Misumi accompanied Miyu to the dwarf village, and soon they met Emma, who was amazed at the formal way Misumi spoke, so she told him that he should speak as he pleased and in a manner befitting his high status in the village. Misumi told her that he would do so, and that this formal way of speaking was due to his time out of the village, which was filled with many tasks and characters that he had to impersonate. Misumi then decided to make a large number of repairs in the village and actually made an agreement with all the sects there for construction and reconstruction. Misumi asks Miyu if she's had any recent contact with Tomo, but she tells him no. When Misumi asks Emma, she tells him she doesn't know anything about Tomo. While they were all talking, Eldo, the old dwarf who was the village elder, came running up to Misumi and told him it was good to see him, and then Eldo offered his his services to help build and improve the village. Afterward, Eldo presented some robes that had a superhuman ability to block all blows, and although Mizumi was not encouraged, after trying them on, he chose one of them. Mizumi then went to Rembrandt's headquarters and delivered the package and told the company's director that his first mission was much more difficult than he thought. After Mizumi fulfills his agreement with the dragon, he gains extra strength, and we see him at the Rembrandt Trading Company to make a deal with the manager. We notice that Mizumi now wears a mask and communicates only by writing so as not to reveal his true personality, as he is still a young boy. Patrick Rembrandt, the company's representative, was a bit surprised that Mizumi could only speak by writing, but he got over it. Patrick then began to ask how Mizumi was doing, and when he arrived, he replied that he had arrived yesterday. We learned that Rembrandt is a company for adventurers, but they also do some business. The company representative was surprised that Mizumi, even though he wanted to join the group, had a clean record of adventuring, which would make it difficult for him to join. The company representative apologized and told him that there was no way he could accept an adventurer with no past adventures into his professional team. But Mizumi surprised Patrick with some of the rarest gemstones, which really surprised Patrick, especially since he was in desperate need of these stones to fight a rare and dangerous disease that his wife and daughters had contracted. So the conversation changed radically, and Patrick apologized to Mizumi profusely. Mizumi asked him about this rare disease, and Patrick replied that the disease was caused by a quack doctor who wanted to harm them, and although the doctor was arrested, the investigators failed to learn any substantial information about the disease or its treatment. But after many tests, they realized the importance of sapphires in the treatment. After the conversation was over, Mizumi asked Patrick how to join the Merchants Guild and told him that he wanted to start his own business. Patrick told him where the guild was located and that he had to pass an important test to be accepted into the guild. Mizumi thanked him and left to go to the Merchants Guild, but there he was shocked to learn that there were 2 exams instead of 1, with one being written theory and the other practical. When Mizumi asked about the nature of the 2 exams, the official replied that the theoretical exam contains several complex questions about trade and informed him that there were similar models of these questions in a book worth 2 gold coins. As for the practical exam, the purpose was to collect rare items that require a skilled adventurer because the guild holds the theory that a skilled merchant must be brave. Although the amount was too much for him, he decided to buy it, and after reading it, he decided to take the exam. The exam questions were indeed very difficult, but Mizumi answered them all perfectly and in record time. Even the proctor was amazed that Mizumi managed to get a perfect score, the first time a test taker had managed to get a perfect score in such a short time. The official then asked Mizumi to randomly select a ball from a box on the table, which Mizumi did. The official then told him that he had to fetch 4 items, the most dangerous of which was the Howling Fang, which would require great skill to fetch given the dangers that Mizumi would face. However, Mizumi managed to obtain all of these items in record time and presented them to the officials, who told him that his guild credentials were about to be issued. Mizumi was overjoyed, especially since the rules would have required him to wait up to 6 months if he failed to pass either of the 2 tests. Shortly afterward, Mizumi was issued a credential card that allowed him to roam anywhere in the guild, but he was surprised by the drinks they served there, and when he tasted them, he didn't like the taste, so he went out to find something he knew to eat. He then met his fellow guildmates and noticed that the atmosphere was tense. When he asked one of them why, she replied that the relationship between Tomo and Miyu was not going well. We noticed that the main reason for the disagreement was extreme jealousy, as each of them all wanted to catch Mizumi's eye, but he didn't care about such things. When it was time for bed, Mizumi went into his bedroom and was surprised to find Miyu and Tomo in the same room. The problem for him was that there were only 2 beds in the room, which meant he had to sleep next to one of them. Jealousy flared up again, and the conflict almost erupted again, but Mizumi decided to sleep alone on the couch, leaving each of them with a bed. Things were quiet in the guild, and Mizumi was getting used to the atmosphere, but he didn't know what to expect. Patrick Rembrandt's enemies were keeping a close eye on Mizumi, and were amazed at how quickly Mizumi passed the guild's exams and began to formulate their plan to eliminate Patrick. At the Rembrandt facility, Mizumi was in the parking lot with another person to give the ruby insect eyes to the company officials. When it was Mizumi's turn, the person who was with Mizumi stepped forward to perform the ritual, but Mizumi was amazed that the person was shivering like a wet kitten. Mizumi realized the importance of those ruby eyes to the company officials and learned that they highly value ruby eyes because they are able to extract a rare substance from them after complex chemical processing. Suddenly, Mizumi's stupid roommate staggered across the room and dropped the ruby eyes, and Mizumi took a huge leap and saved the day. Mizumi's amazement at Rembrandt's interest in the liquid ended when he learned the truth. He learned that the owner's wife had recently contracted a rare disease that left her with a curse that made her lose her beauty, lose her hair, and become a ghost. Knowing this, Mizumi decided to intervene himself and asked the manager to let him treat his wife. Although the official was uncomfortable because his wife's situation was so difficult, he eventually gave in to Mizumi's insistence. Mizumi went to the place where the company owner's wife was, and strangely enough, as soon as she saw him, she attacked him with all the ferocity of a predator. But Misumi didn't pay attention to that and quickly asked for medicine from the official who was with him. Strangely enough, as soon as the company owner's wife took a dose of the liquid extracted from the ruby eyes, she recovered most of her health and most of her symptoms disappeared. After Rembrandt's owner was satisfied that Misumi had the ability to heal, he told him that his daughter was also suffering from the same disease. Misumi took another dose of the remedy and went straight to his daughter's room and found her suffering from the same symptoms, albeit not as advanced as her mother's. Misumi knew this because the girl told him to go away, so Misumi concluded that she still had some human feelings. But he approached her and the monster inside her came out and attacked him, but he was able to give her the potion and most of her symptoms disappeared and her appearance normalized. Rembrandt's relatives were amazed at the rare courage Misumi had shown in his treatment. The owner of the company asked him who he was, but Misumi told him that he was an ordinary person and that there was nothing to praise. He had only done his duty. After Misumi finished his task, he walked out of the company's headquarters and was surprised to find Tomo and Miyu waiting for him and began to ask him about everything he had done since the last time they met. Misumi started to speak, but soon heard a loud noise that he thought was coming from the footstep, but it was loud enough to suggest that a herd of raging bulls was on its way. A few moments later, a large number of fighters arrived on the scene and immediately began to engage Misumi. Tomo made a typical attempt to win Misumi's favor, so she used the power of the dragon within her and bravely defended him. Of course, Miyu didn't like this and decided to sit back and watch, but it didn't take long for Misumi and Tomo to defeat these fighters with ease. Misumi then realized that the young man who was with him inside Rembrandt was behind all of this, and that it was all a plan by the company's haters to eliminate its powerful influence in the market. He told Misumi, Miyu, and Tomo that there was an agreement between him and a villain to synthesize a substance with a powerful curse and then release it on people, especially those close to Rembrandt's family, so they chose the owner's wife and daughter first. Misumi asks Tomo to read the memories of this young man, whose name we learn is Lime, and Tomo does so and confirms to Misumi that he is indeed telling the truth. Lime thought that Misumi was going to inflict the cruelest torture on him, but Misumi told him that he would leave him alone to get his life back on track as long as he didn't return to such evil deeds again. Lime was overjoyed because this was contrary to his desperate expectations. Before Lime left, Misumi asked him to go and apologize to the Rembrandt family for the trouble he had caused them. But when he went to apologize, the company owner's brother wanted to put him to death for what he had done. But the company owner told his brother that his wife and daughter had recovered and there was no need to punish Lime out of respect for Misumi, who promised to release him. Tomo had broken Lime's sword in the battle, so after things calmed down and they were on good terms, Tomo gave him a new sword as a gift. Lime was fascinated by the sword because it looked like a masterpiece, but Tomo told him that nothing in life is free and that it was in exchange for Lime becoming her spy. Lime looked at her like an idiot and asked her not to embellish. She was asking him to be her lapdog, and Tomo told him that she really wanted that. After Misumi completed his mission at Rembrandt, he went back to live in the dwarf village and everything was fine. But one day while eating lunch with Tomo and Miyu, Emma tells them that she has something important to tell them. Misumi asks Emma to tell him what she wants, and Emma starts talking to him. She tells him that she wants Misumi, along with Miyu and Tomo, to oversee the training of the dwarf village's fighters so that they can stand up to any enemy in case of danger. Misumi agreed to her request and assigned Tomo and Miyu to gather the necessary information to familiarize themselves with the various abilities of the fighters within the village. Misumi then went on a tour of the village, during which he overheard some of the fighters talk. One of them was saying to the other, "Is it necessary to train under this idiot? I'd rather die." Misumi understood that they were objecting to training under him and knew that he was in for a dark and barren day. As for Tomo and Miyu, as usual, they both tried to compete for Misumi's favor. While Tomo was gathering information for the fighters, Miyu had more important things to do and was busy wooing Misumi by bringing him fresh fruit. Tomo came back and saw the scene, which upset her, and then told Misumi that the fighters' fighting ability was lower than she had expected and that it would be difficult to train them. Emma was in the same place as the conversation between Tomo and Misumi, so she told Misumi that the fighters may not be willing to show all their skills so as not to start training. Also, each class doesn't want to show their tactics and secrets in front of other classes. Tomo came up with an idea at that time and showed it to Misumi, who ordered all the fighters to gather for a talk. The fighters gathered, but in fact, Misumi didn't speak to them, Tomo did. We could see from her words that she was deliberately stirring up each faction against the others until it came to a head and the clashes between the factions began. Tomo then told them that each of the sects should nominate a fighter to fight against the other sect's fighter. Two cults nominated a fighter and a fierce battle between the fighters began. At this moment, Misumi was worried about what was happening. He had a feeling that these fighters were going to raze the village to the ground. The battle ended with one of the fighters winning, but Tomo still took her anger out on everyone and told them that this battle only showed a low level of strength. She told all the fighters that if they continue at this level, they will be defeated by any enemy. Tomo spoke to the fighters in a harsh manner, much to the surprise of Misumi, who felt that he was useless and that Tomo had become the leader in his place or had forgotten that he even existed. Tomo then told everyone that she had created an intensive training schedule in which the fighters would undergo rigorous training on a daily basis. There would be individual battles at the end of each training session to see how the fighters were progressing. She also kept motivating them, telling them that she herself would evaluate each fighter, and the one who rose to the top would join the army of strong fighters who would defend the village from the dangers. Misumi was thinking to himself, when is this idiot going to finish talking so I can go home and eat without being bothered by her? Tomo soon finished talking, and the fighters were encouraged to stick to her plan. Misumi went with Tomo to the Adventurers Guild to check his current level with his card. There he learned that his level had increased, but not as much as he thought, and that the oldest adventurer had retired. Tomo then began to train the fighters in hardcore types of training in order to raise their level quickly. Most of the fighters improved significantly, except for a handful of idiots that Tomo berated and reprimanded every day. After the fighters finished their field training, Tomo took them to the most difficult stage, which was the simulation of real battle. She designed a full battlefield as if they were in an actual war and assigned each fighter a specific task. Despite the different categories of fighters, the training made them merge into a single army. One day, Tomo asked them to fight a battle against an army of monkeys. The attack was successful, and every fighter did his part, except for the dwarf, who made a huge mistake in estimating the amount of poison he was supposed to throw in the way of the monkeys. Tomo told him, if you make that mistake again, you idiot, you'll never be on the team again. The fighters then reached the final level and were tasked with going out of Segi village for a mission in the forests of Tenarak. After a short time, they returned to the village and told Tomo that they had accomplished everything they had set out to do. Tomo rejoiced and told them that they had become the powerful army responsible for protecting the village. Misumi learned from the fighters that the forests of Tenarak are full of ruby eyes, so he decided to move there. At the same time, he wanted to open a store where he could sell items extracted from the sapphire eyes, so he had to go to the owner of Rembrandt to ask for a store. Although it's against the rules, the owner considers what Misumi did for him in the past when he saved his wife and daughter, so he decides to give him the store. Misumi, along with Miyu and Tomo, arrive in the Tenarak forest and begin to explore the place, but they don't realize that someone is spying on them. At the time, the adventurers were eavesdropping on Misumi, Miyu, Tomo, and Emma to find out what they were up to in their forest. In fact, Misumi was there to search for a rare type of flower that would help him produce various products that he would like to sell exclusively in his store. The jealousy between Tomo and Miyu continued as they each tried to get Misumi's attention. We saw Tomo after she had prepared delicious food for Misumi, and then Miyu decided not to miss the opportunity and went to feed Misumi herself, which naturally angered Tomo. Misumi wasn't as concerned about all this as he was about finding the flower he wanted, and we saw him asking the helpers if they had found the flower. One of the assistants reassured him that they had found the flower and told him the coordinates that would help them find it. Misumi then began celebrating his new store, and all the groups were happy and gathered to listen to Misumi speak. But Misumi didn't think he was a good speaker and couldn't say much in front of them. At night, Misumi decided to hold a meeting of the different classes to tell each class their new role. We see a representative of the lizard class named Lady telling Misumi that his class is very strong and has a great ability to fight. As for the dwarf class, Misumi told him that his class would be in charge of manufacturing weapons because dwarves are very skilled in blacksmithing. The bear class representative, who was larger than Misumi's sorrows after moving to the new world, appeared next. Misumi asked him what his class was going to do, and the representative told him that they were going to introduce all the classes to the fictional city. It was funny to Misumi because the bear's voice was soft and disproportionate to its size. We saw Tomo talking to Miyu, who was worried that she hadn't told Misumi something very important about beings called ambrosia, creatures that take care of the flower that Misumi is looking for. But Tomo kept reassuring her that it was no big deal. Meanwhile, Miyu couldn't tell if Tomo was really advising her or trying to set her up to get closer to Misumi. Suddenly, a stray arrow flew into the place where they were sitting, startling them both. But Miyu was even more frightened. She ran over to where Misumi was and hugged him. Miyu was furious and said to herself, that sly girl never misses an opportunity to get close to Misumi. They then asked Misumi what happened, and Misumi told them that he was just practicing archery. But to their surprise, the stray arrow went out of all the orbits that Misumi had been shooting arrows through. From their point of view, there was only one explanation, and that was that Misumi's mana had risen. In other words, he was merging with all the entities around him, which was a dangerous sign, and Miyu was crying her eyes out. But Misumi kept reassuring her as she held him, and Tomo, of course, almost exploded with rage. Miyu decided to take care of Misumi that night and hoped to have a long talk with him. But as soon as he came home and Miyu started talking, Misumi told her that he was going to bed and had no time to waste, so Miyu left in shame. The next morning, Misumi was walking down the street to do some shopping for his store, but he runs into a very pretty girl who starts flirting with him. Miyu and Tomo appear out of nowhere and decide to punish Misumi. They took him back home and kept talking to him, asking him what they had done wrong to make him care about this strange girl. But Misumi told them them, "Get off me, you two idiots. I don't have time for you." Misumi then went to the store to buy things to help him start his new store. After Misumi finished buying what he wanted, Miyu appeared and kept apologizing to Misumi for last night and what happened, but Misumi told her that there was no need to apologize and that everything was fine. The forest warriors were worried that Misumi would reach the place filled with the rare red lotus flower, so the forest warriors were watching Misumi and his companions' movements all the time. After some walking through the forest, Misumi and Miyu arrived at a place where there were a lot of lotus flowers. Misumi decided to stay because the ambrosia creatures always appear next to the lotus flowers to protect them. But then the lotus guards showed up and accused Misumi and Miyu of being thieves. Misumi approached Miyu to protect her and held her hand. At that moment, Miyu forgot all about their situation and wished that time would stop at that moment so that Misumi could still hold her hand. But the flower guards didn't give them a chance and immediately began attacking them with deadly fire arrows. If it weren't for Misumi's powerful cloaking spell, he and his companions would have disappeared. The chase was fierce between the lotus flower guards and Misumi and Miyu. When Misumi sensed that danger was imminent, he tried to psychically communicate with Tomo, who was aware of what was happening, but her jealousy prevented her from intervening. She kept saying to herself, "Let's let that idiot do her thing." She met Miyu, of course, as she was very angry with her after seeing Misumi holding her hand. When Misumi asked her for help, she refused and told him that Miyu would help him in her own way. When she's scared, she eats her favorite food. Misumi remembered that Miyu's favorite food is humans and knew that Tomo would rather die than see him with Miyu. Misumi wasn't interested in all this nonsense. He was in grave danger when the flower guards surrounded him and started attacking him and Miyu. Misumi tells Miyu to start summoning her superpowers and he does the same to engage the guard. But before the battle begins, Misumi decides to make one last attempt with the guards and tells them that he only came to talk to them, not to steal their flowers. He's not a thief, but a merchant looking for rare goods to sell in his own shop. The guards took him at his word and exchanged introductions, and Misumi recognized the guard as Aqua and his colleague as Iris. After their conversation was over, Aqua and Iris asked Misumi and Miyu to follow them to the Council of Elders, which is responsible for dealing with all visitors to the village. On the way, Misumi learns that this village is called Ogre Forest Village and that it is protected by a very powerful system of magical spells. Soon they arrived at the Council of Elders, who began to question them about why they had come to the village. Misumi told them that he was a merchant who had come to look for some rare medicinal materials to sell in his shop. However, some of the people sitting in the council did not believe this, especially because they felt that the aura emanating from Misumi and Miyu was too strong to be consistent with the aura emanating from human beings. Adono, who was a wild and talkative young man, then entered the conversation like a wild donkey and kept asking about the identity of Misumi and Miyu. Misumi knew that Adono was responsible for training Aqua and Iris, so he kept berating them for being defeated by Misumi and Miyu. But Misumi wasn't comfortable with the idea that Adono was just a coach and was sure that he had something to do with demons and a dark secret behind him. So Misumi asked Miyu to spy on Adono. Although Miyu was happy that Misumi had given her a task, deep down she was annoyed because she felt that Misumi was only asking her to take advantage of her. Nevertheless, she began to follow Adono and soon realized that Misumi was right. She saw Adono in a psychic session, communicating with demons. One day during one of the sessions, Adono merged with the demon he was communicating with and began to take over the whole village. But Misumi decides to stand up to him, and the demon thinks Misumi's power is insignificant. But Misumi summoned all his spiritual energy and used his most powerful spells to destroy the demon's dark energy, and he managed to defeat it to the amazement of all the villagers. But the villagers were furious with Misumi for daring to use his spells against a member of the village. Tomo appeared at this time and told them that she was the great Shin Dragon. She told them that she was just a follower of Misumi, which made the villagers change their treatment of him for the better. Misumi took Adono in his demonic form and began interrogating him, asking him why he was using these spells. Adono told him that he was doing it to keep his strength up so no one could hurt him. That's when Misumi offered him a deal. Adono would show him the book of demonic spells in exchange for Misumi not killing him. Miyu and Tomo are surprised by Misumi's request and step forward to kill Adono before he gives Misumi the spell. Misumi told them to back off and told them that he would learn these spells as a matter of knowledge so that no one would be able to harm them in the future. But Tomo told Misumi that it's not that easy. There's something called the gift that will prevent him from knowing the spells. When Misumi asked her what the gift was, she told him that it was a human being who tried to travel between different worlds but got lost in the process. As Misumi continued his conversation with Adono, he realized that he was one of the gifts that got lost, and Adono was despondent that he would never be able to return to his world again. But Misumi asked him to show him his strength and told him that he would do his best, along with Miyu and Tomo, to bring him back to his home world. However, when Misumi began his attempt to return Adono to his original world, Adono transformed into his human form. He told Misumi that he would be happy to join him, and Misumi had a trio of Miyu, Tomo, and Adono. Suddenly, the unexpected happens as Tomo starts bleeding and loses consciousness while Adono and Miyu are distraught. Misumi was very confused about what happened to Tomo, but Adono Adona told everyone to move quickly because he heard an explosion before Tomo fell and started bleeding. As soon as Misumi and Adona got out of their place, they were surprised to find most of the villagers injured and in a serious condition between life and death. This frightened Misumi, especially since he won't be able to use healing magic because his Adventurer's Guild score doesn't allow him to do so at the moment, and he needs to level up in his ID to be able to do so. Adona offered to heal the injured, and Misumi agreed. Misumi then had the brilliant idea of combining his magic power with his mana to at least revive the injured. Adona asked him to save his mana and told him that he would deal with the rest of the infected. After a search, Misumi found the person who caused the explosion and confronted her with everything that had happened, at which point she tried to attack Misumi to kill him. But Misumi, with his magical power, was able to defeat her with his small dagger and killed her even though she had a large sword. The next day, Misumi saw that Tomo was doing well and realized that others had lost their lives in the explosion, so he held a funeral for them, attended by all the people living in the village. Tomo and Miyu are back to harassing each other, with Tomo deliberately emphasizing Misumi's concern for her after what happened, much to Miyu's annoyance. Therefore, Miyu kept repeating that all this attention was unintentional and that Misumi's defense of Tomo was an accident and was just an emotional and impulsive decision. They kept arguing with each other non-stop, which drove Misumi out of his mind, and he kept telling them that you won't change no matter what. Misumi then began to plan how to protect the village from future attacks, assigning each class a specific task so that no one could harm the villagers again, because lizards are characterized by agility and constant vigilance. Misumi instructed their leader to divide his class into patrols that would continue throughout the day to check the areas around the village in order to identify all those entering or leaving the village. Misumi then assigned other tasks to the other classes, such as treating the injured, gathering information, and so on. Misumi also decided to build an invisible wall around the village as a clever defense strategy, so that those who come will think they are in the fictitious city. The guards would be able to inform Misumi of the number of arrivals, and he could defend the village if he knew they were enemies. The leader of the dwarf tribe then came to talk to Misumi, and told him that he would take care of the warehouse where all the detritus would be collected. Misumi asked him to dispose of all the detritus as soon as possible, so that it would not be used in demonic magic spells again. The dwarf chieftain promised that he would take care of his work and be careful. All the people of Segi felt that they owed a debt of gratitude to Misumi, who had saved their village from ruin after his many efforts against all the evil plans that were about to be carried out in their village. But Misumi told them that he had only done his duty, and if it weren't for their efforts, the entire village would have been lost. We then moved on to the town of Rudsgard Academy, where Misumi was meeting with the owners of Rembrandt, who asked him for all the details to start financing his new store. Misumi asked them for a map in order to locate his store and the village of Segi on the map. When they brought the map, Misumi was certain that he had protected the village sufficiently to not expose it to dangerous attacks in the future. Misumi then began talking to the owners of the company about the details of the business, and the owner told him that he would write a letter of recommendation to encourage other stores in neighboring villages to do business with Misumi's store. Misumi was very grateful and thanked the owner, but the owner told him that this was nothing compared to Misumi's efforts in the past to cure his daughter and wife. Misumi then decided to stop lying to the owners of Rembrandt, so he took off the mask and expected them to fire him on the spot. The owner of the company handled the situation wisely and told him that he was not bothered by how his wife and daughter looked when they got sick, and he certainly wouldn't be bothered now that he knew the truth about Misumi's humanity. Misumi then returned to the village of Segi and began talking to Miyu, Tomo, and Adorno, telling them that he would have to leave the village for a while. This was so that he could learn more about magic spells and also learn the science that would make his shop the best shop in all the villages. Misumi's friends were saddened by the news, but Misumi told them that he had prepared a gift for them that they would love. The gift consisted of several books with all his memories and knowledge that he had acquired up to that time, and they would have to work hard to study them until he came back to them again. Misumi then said goodbye to everyone, packed his bags, and prepared to leave, but as soon as he left, he was surprised by a fierce attack. The attack was by two beautiful girls, but Misumi wasn't too concerned about that at the time, as one of the idiotic fighters struck Misumi with a powerful blow that severed most of his fingers. Misumi wasn't aware of what was going on, but he noticed that the aura emanating from the two fighters was indicative of their great strength. Misumi was frozen in place for a few seconds as he watched his hand with the amputated fingers, and then asked the two idiots who had attacked him why they had attacked him. They told him something that shocked him when he realized that the war between humans and demons had already begun, and that to them, he's an enemy at this time and they should kill him. Misumi was fortunate to have the protection of the master who transferred him from his original world to this human world, so he attacked them, but their strength was much higher than his, so they were unaffected by the attack. Misumi was then forced to change his attack strategy, and instead of making lightning strikes, he opted for stealth. But the two girls began to set up a lot of traps to prevent Misumi from escaping. Instead of attacking, Misumi decided to get to know them. They told him their names were Lancer and Sophie. Misumi introduces himself as an ordinary merchant who wants to go to his shop to buy and sell, but they told him that they would do their duty and kill him on the spot. Misumi had no choice but to fight, so he summoned all his spiritual energy and used all the mana he had and was able to repel their attack. Lancer and Sophie were very surprised because the spell that they attacked with was lethal and should have killed Masumi instantly, but it didn't. Therefore, they both felt that Masumi was not an easy opponent and that it would be very difficult to face him. Sophia then approached to engage Masumi, who was very afraid of this confrontation, especially since Sophia's weapon was very powerful, so Masumi felt that he was in big trouble, but the little elf's weapon was stronger than her sword, and Masumi managed to break Sophia's sword with a single blow. Lancer then rushed like a wild cow to attack Masumi, but it was too late because the demon army quickly arrived at their place and started attacking everyone in the place. Masumi wanted to end the scene, so he gathered all the power from the rings he was wearing. His focus was on the water spell that would defeat the demon's fire spells, and Masumi was able to drown everyone in the place and leave quickly. The owners of Rembrandt's company learned what had happened and were amazed that someone had been able to stop the demon army. Masumi then returned to stay in the village with Miyu and Tomo and told them that they were his top lieutenants, which made them happy, but not without the usual jealousy. Despite the victory and the fact that Masumi had managed to fend off any danger to the village, Masumi then met with the leader of the dwarf sect and thanked him for his elaborate weapons, which played an important role in the victory over all enemies. Masumi also began producing his first medical products, which had the magical ability to heal even the most difficult wounds in a matter of seconds. The owners of Rembrandt's company were watching everything from afar and were impressed by Masumi's great ability. He was able to transform Segi from a poor and weak village to a powerful village with a distinguished army and a full-fledged store that specializes in selling magical products that can only be found in their store. Masumi then decided to embark on a long-delayed journey to find his father and mother in different worlds. While he was thinking about this, Emma came and interrupted his thoughts, telling him that everyone was gathered for the banquet to celebrate the opening of the store and that they were all listening to Masumi's speech. Masumi went to the meeting place of the sects to give the speech, and as he walked, he remembered the whole journey from beginning to end, and he kept telling himself that life in this human world isn't so bad. But when he arrived at the meeting place, he saw the constant disagreement between Tomo and Miyu and thought to himself that life would have been better without those two idiots.